Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
There's never a dull day in newsroom, but even by the usual standards of India's news environment, which is always lively, full of breaking news, today was extraordinary. That's because as we woke up in the morning, first of all, the news broke that the US Department of Justice and Securities and Exchange Commission had both charged the Adani Group with multiple offenses, multiple alleged offenses in a 54-page indictment, or what might be called a charge sheet. The American legal system is a little bit different because a grand jury has to go through the evidence, and once they are convinced, once the grand jury is convinced, then you get an indictment done. So this indictment, 54 pages, it has multiple charges, but basically, if I could summarize them, this is a conspiracy. The charge is that Adani Group engaged in a conspiracy with some people in the US, but ultimately mostly within themselves, and also some people who worked for a company in the US to bribe a bunch of Indian officials to sell them solar power produced by them at a particular price. That is the larger conspiracy. Now, this is a crime in the US under a law there called FCPA, which is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. If any of you has signed a contract with an American firm, there will always usually be some kind of a disclosure requirement or a disclaimer or something that you've never indulged in something like this, a foreign corrupt practice, etc., or that this does not amount to foreign corrupt practice. It's a law that's taken very seriously. And a lot of the American companies suffer because of this. And in the past, many American companies have actually signed very large settlements with US Department of Justice. In fact, of the many such cases we see, there is also one of a company called Odebrecht with Braskem. This is bribery in Brazil, and they settled by paying $3.5 billion, and this is not now. That was in 2016. So FCPA, foreign corrupt practices, is a law that's taken very seriously in the US. So that is one. And then linked to that are charges of conspiracy, charges of wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. That is what this 54 pages of indictment contains. It is written as the American legal documents are written, point by point, and also with subheadings, etc., almost like a magazine cover story. Now, both I and Sharad Raghavan, TCA Sharad Raghavan, who's our editor for economics, we've been reading it. I'm relying on him to tell us more details, and I will come in when I have to explain some politics of it or some implications, particularly larger political, diplomatic, other implications, and also what does it mean for the Adani Group going ahead. So Sharad, give us a 2-minute summary.
Okay, so first I'll go over the people who have been named in this indictment.
Dramatis personae.
Yes. So number one, of course, is Gautam Adani, who needs no introduction, but founder and chairman of the Adani Group. Then there's Sagar Adani, who's not only Gautam Adani's nephew, but he's also an executive director at Adani Green Energy. This is an important company in the indictment. Vinny Jain is the managing director and CEO of Adani Green Energy. Ranjit Gupta is CEO of the American company that Mr. Gupta talked about, which is Azure Power Global. He was the CEO until 2022. Rupesh Agarwal, a former senior executive at Azure Power. Then we come to the only one person who's been named but who's not an Indian citizen, at least wasn't at the time. Cyril Cabanes, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, but he's an Australian-French citizen and was a former director at Azure Power Global. He also worked for, earlier, the Canadian pension fund CDPQ, which the indictment said was the biggest stakeholder in Azure Power Global. Then there's Saurabh Agarwal, who the indictment says worked closely with Cabanes at the Canadian Pension Fund. Deepak Malhotra, who also previously worked at the Canadian Pension Fund and also served as a non-executive director at Azure Power Global. So there is a strong connection between that company and the pension fund. Then we come to the unnamed people. There's co-conspirator 1, who the indictment says from approximately October 2021 till October 2023, he was the non-executive chairman of the board of Azure Power and its subsidiaries. Now, it's simple enough to Google search and find out who this person is, but since he's not been named in the indictment, I guess we can leave it at that. The co-conspirator 2 was a citizen of India who resided in India from July 2019 through April 2022. This person held a high-ranking executive position at Azure Power Global and its subsidiaries. This is a little more vague. We couldn't exactly find out who this person is. But then we come to Foreign Official 1. This is a very interesting person. This person is from approximately May 2019 through June 2024. Foreign Official 1 served as a high-ranking government official of Andhra Pradesh. Now, why this person is interesting is basically what the allegation is that all of these people who've been named, most of them got together and conspired to try to pay bribes to various state government officials, prominent amongst whom was this Foreign Official 1 in Andhra Pradesh. Why? Because what this indictment says is that the total amount that they planned to pay as bribe was 2,029 crore, out of which just the amount that was planned to go to Andhra Pradesh was 1,750 crore, or 86% of the total amount that was to go as bribes to various states went or was supposed to go to only Andhra Pradesh.
Now, I'll say three things. One, without making any judgment or any loaded statement, just the timing, 2019 to 2024. If this official was functioning in Andhra Pradesh, that is precisely the tenure of the Jagan government, Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy government of YSRCP. That's just a coincidence, right? But we have to take notice of it. Second, Sagar Adani. He's a nephew, but he's not the only nephew. It sounds like he's the nephew of Gautam Adani. There are many nephews and many nephews' sons who work in the business. Right. That's the second. And the third thing is, which I find intriguing, or I found intriguing until I checked out and maybe figured out the reason. That is that while you mentioned Adani Green, and you said that is a very important company in this case because they were the ones making solar power. Yes. But they haven't been charged in this indictment. No. And it's intriguing on plain reading as to why has the company not been charged. But possibly the company hasn't been charged because the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act does not apply to Indian companies. Right. It applies to American companies. And that's probably the reason this has been kept out. And this conspiracy case has been made out in a way that Indian company officials, Gautam Adani downwards, in its top management, they were allegedly conspiring with functionaries of a company which is over which the US has jurisdiction under FCPA. So it's that little bit of clutter which I thought I will underline right now. Absolutely. Go ahead now.
So what the basic, why is the US interested in people over here bribing each other? Why would the US government be interested in that? The point is that the Adani high functionaries, including Gautam Adani, they raised a lot of money in the US from investors. They issued bonds, they underwrote a lot of securities, and the numbers given here are quite large. One is the obtaining more than 2 billion of United States dollar-denominated bank loans from international financial institutions and US-based asset management companies, and offering more than $1 billion in securities underwritten by international financial institutions and marketed and sold to investors in the US. amongst other places. This is why the US is interested, because under these laws, it's saying that you have raised money from us and you have to declare that, we have not been engaging in any foreign corrupt practices and all of that. But here we have proof that shows that you have been indulging in these corrupt practices. So you have been defrauding our investors.
It's an interesting situation, because
Right.
in the US it was also to clean up the act at their own corporate
Yes.
in their own corporate universe, that with a lot of activism, etc. They said our companies should not go out and bribe in other countries because it was getting Americans a bad name. And in America, the left and right keep alternating, and different people have different view on regulation. So they impose this on American companies, and I've seen many American companies, chief executives and others complain about this. They say we have to go and do business all over the world, and we have to compete with European companies, particularly French companies, for which none of this is illegal. In fact, if anything, you get a tax break for doing this. This is a tax exempt expense. So these are also a bunch of contradictions in the developed world. Now, Sharad, the important thing to understand for us here, I know everybody is watching this and reading this, is that there is a cutout in the middle. There is a cutout in the whole deal. If the deal is that Adani is producing the solar power, who buys? In India, state governments buy. So state governments have distribution companies or utility companies, as the Americans would call them. Most of them are bankrupt, and you can see why, right? Partly because they give free power, partly because funny things happen on the side. And the big thing is power purchase. Now, when a manufacturer produces power, the manufacturer renewable power does not sell directly to a state utility.
Right.
The manufacturer has to go to a go-between.
Yes.
And that go-between is a government company. It's a PSU. So you will tell us about the 4 PSUs, but in this case, the PSU involved is SECI or SECI or SECI, whatever you want to call it, which is Solar Energy Corporation of India. Its website tells you that it's a Navratna. Its revenue last year was 13,000 crores, 13,135 crores. Its profit was 436 crores, which is basically rent, because what it's doing is enabling a manufacturer to sell to a user. It's there in the middle, taking a cut on the way, right?
Yep,
So this is a rent-seeking company. So once again, in all these cases, all these state governments that this indictment mentions, where Adani has sold power and where allegedly money has been paid, bribe money has been paid, the power purchase agreement, there are 2 things again to understand. One is a power sale agreement or PSA, that is signed between the state utility and SECI. It is not signed between the state utility and the manufacturer, in this case being Adani. The second is PPA, which is power purchase agreement. That is signed between the producer and SECI or any of the 4 such companies. Sharad will tell you about all 4. That's how there is a cutout in the middle. So if at all any deals have to be done with state governments, so the allegation in this case is that the Adani Group went over SECI to the state governments to strike these deals so they could sign up to buy power at these prices from SECI while it was produced by Adani. It's a bit complicated, but because things are complicated, you have cut the clutter. So tell us about these companies, because Government of India has built its own little rental system there.
Yes. So the Government of India basically has, for renewable energy, it has this system called Renewable Energy Implementing Agencies. That's what SECI, SECI is a part of. There are 4 of them. There is SECI, NTPC, NHPC, and SJVN, which was formerly Sutlej Jal Vidyut Nigam. Now, these are the 4 companies.
NTPC, NHPC, everybody knows, but still, National Thermal Power Corporation. In fact, their IPO for their own green energy enterprise is going on right now. NTPC Green, and NHPC is National Hydel Power Corporation.
But these companies, if you check their web, they no longer refer to them as the full form. They've acronymed themselves. But in any case, so these are the four companies, and so solar power producers, they sell to these four companies, and then these four companies sell onwards to the state power distribution companies. And now we looked at SECI's financials, and its revenue has been growing over the last 5 years. Say, for example, in 2019-20, its revenue was 4,645 crores. By the latest year, the last financial year, 2023-24, this was 13,135, a near tripling in revenue. Similarly, for profits, it was 232.4 crores in 2019-20, which is now the latest financial year, 436 crore of profits.
And it would have gone up this year because in India, renewables production is going up.
Oh, absolutely.
Solar in particular.
In
Because
fact,
we have lots of solar units. It's not just Adani.
Our total solar capacity as of October 2023 was 92 gigawatts. So, and it's quite a bit larger than what it was in, say, even just a few years ago, but definitely 2014.
One gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. For those like me who don't understand these things too easily, 1,000 megawatts.
So basically, just the broad timeline, why SECI is important in all of this is because somewhere between December 2019 and July 2020, the indictment says that Azure Power and Adani Green Energy were awarded a contract by SECI to supply 12 gigawatts of solar power in total. 8 of this from Adani, 4 of this from Azure. Now, the thing is that in the indictment, they don't actually name these companies, but easy for us, Adani Green Energy and Azure Power both issued press releases in June 2020 and July 2020 saying that we won these awards. So it's easy for us to verify that this actually happened. But then what happened was, because of the pricing in this agreement, SECI could not find any buyers for its electricity. None of the state power distribution companies were buying from SECI at the rates that it wanted to sell, and at the rates that it probably had to sell because of the agreement with these two companies. That's when all of this alleged bribery became important, because the problem is, if state power distribution companies don't buy from SECI, SECI will not buy from Adani and Azure. So it was really, really important for these two companies to ensure that state power companies bought from SECI. And that's where this entire bribery angle comes in.
So Azure in this case was to supply a much smaller percentage of the total solar power.
Yes.
Now, as we read this indictment, Sharad, it sounds like a little bit of a detective novel or a thriller. Little bit of a Perry Mason story. I don't know. You're too young to have read Perry Mason.
I have read Perry Mason.
You have read Perry Mason. So, but it's a bit like that also. That's how most of us, my generation, became aware of the American legal system. The subpoena, for example, the grand jury, the jury process. Because in India, jury process stopped with the Nanavati case a long time back. Right. Now, there is a section called bribe notes. That says that Sagar Adani, allegedly in this case, because allegedly is to be taken for granted everywhere, because also the indictment says these are allegations, and the indictment itself says quite clearly that everybody is innocent until proven guilty. Absolutely. Because it's an indictment. These are charges in a court. These are not proven. This is what the prosecution is saying for now. Now, they allege that he was maintaining like Excel sheets of states or regions where power to be supplied, the amount of bribe allegedly to be given, the approximate amount of solar power that was to be given, and a per megawatt rate. In fact, it goes on to say that the per megawatt rate, like a tariff card of bribe or alleged bribe, was 25 lakhs per megawatt. That is what this suggests was quoted or was stated for Azure. Now, it also says that he was making screenshots of these, he was taking pictures of these, and these guys, FBI got access to it. Now, if you read deeper into the indictment, it tells you that at some point they got warrants. They got warrants to investigate Sagar Adani. They got hold of Sagar Adani, and sometime in March in 2023, FBI got hold of Sagar Adani with a subpoena, a search warrant and subpoena to seized to possess his electronic devices. Probably that's where they got all this stuff out from. I don't know. Maybe they were doing other stuff also, because they're talking about stuff they got from, say, Gautam Adani's phone. They are talking about PowerPoint presentations which were flowing between these phones. And in fact, they go on to say, to create jurisdiction, they go on to say that many of these were going through the East District of New York, because that's where this court is located. To create a jurisdiction. So there was a grand jury subpoena for the devices and search warrant from FBI. That was 17th of March 2023. And then things move fast. They say on March 18, that's the day after, March 18, Gautam Adani, again according to the indictment, and I'm putting quote marks, emailed to himself all the pages of the search warrant. That's what the indictment is saying. So once again, they have some kind of access to Gautam Adani's phone and email and email as well, to his electronic devices. And then they go on to say, but despite them knowing all this, they never made any disclosure in their annual report or to their investors. And that is the nub of the case against the Adanis.
Right. And now, so that's the case against the Adanis. But then what is the involvement of the various government officials? Is it also only Andhra Pradesh that has been named? No. Now, Andhra Pradesh, yes, it's been named in a big way, because as we'd explained, it accounts for 86% of the planned bribes that these people plan to give out. But it's not the only one. Now, according to the indictment, and here I quote, it says, following the promise of bribes to Indian government officials in or about between July 2021 and Feb 2022, electricity distribution companies for the states and regions of Odisha, Jammu and Kashmir, Tamil Nadu, Chhattisgarh, and Andhra Pradesh entered into the PSAs with SECI under the manufacturing linked project. So this basically means while they say that they found evidence of some sort of plan to give a particular official in Andhra Pradesh bribes, there is some indication that they're saying that other officials in these other state governments also probably were planned to be given bribes as well. There's, of course, now, the important thing is that according to sources close to the Adani Group, there are some key things that have to be kept in mind.
Adani Group has issued a formal statement that will be on your screens, because we have to be fair in our coverage, as we always are.
So the Adani Group has categorically denied any of the allegations that have been made against it in the statement that it made. Basically, it's saying that these are all baseless. Everything that it's been doing has been above board. All of it has been legal. It's assured its investors, its employees on all of this, and said that it will be seeking legal remedies for this situation. That's what Adani has said on the record. Off the record, sources have said and made some important points. They've said that no company has been charged so far. No official, no state government official has been named as having been the receiver of bribes. No money has been found that has been the product of bribe giving or bribe taking. No trace of any money trail has been found so far. So if it's been an electronic transaction, there's been no trace so far. And apparently, Azure informed SECI on 8th December 2022 that it was withdrawing from the agreement, but SECI only accepted this withdrawal on 18th March 2024. Another important fact is that Azure informed the SECI on 8th December 2022 that it was pulling out of the agreement, something that SECI only agreed to and accepted on 18th March 2024. What happened in this intervening period? All the key executives left the company, most of whom have been named in this indictment.
That's Azure.
Yes.
Azure. And remember, sometimes it gets confusing or cluttered because we are dealing with SEC on the one end and SECI. So that is SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission in America. This is the Solar Energy Corporation of India. So SECI, because they are the ones through whom these sales were being done. However, when you read this, this is, first of all, I told you that there is the claim of this document that says that a tariff of 25 lakh per megawatt by way of speed money, bribe, grease, whatever you call it, that was charged, and that was owed to the Adani Group, or allegedly owed to the Adani Group. And there is a PowerPoint presentation on that made by Rupesh Agrawal, alleged everywhere, which also gives options as to how Azure could pay this money. One of the options is that they could pay it as development fee, which they say could have been for the smaller amount, that is some 565 megawatts or something.
Right.
That would be about $7 million or 55 crores. Then, or transfer their power purchase agreements, right, to Adani, or transfer only 2.3 gigawatts of power purchase agreements, or make a joint venture with the Adanis. This indictment, by the way, does not name Adani, the company, Adani Green. It's very careful. It says Indian Energy Company, IEC.
Yes.
And once again, it could be because they cannot charge an Indian company under Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
But now, what is the next step? What can the US do to Adani? Can they ask for his extradition?
Well, these are serious cases because in America, corporate cases are taken very seriously. And as you can see, there are two parallel cases. There is a Department of Justice case, and there is also an SEC case. So SEC case is more civil. Now, extradition, the two countries have an extradition treaty. So extradition, in fact, I also speak from very recent knowledge because I read up on some of it while talking about Tahabur Rana, the 2611 accused who's now serving a sentence in America. So as he finishes there, he's going to be or expected to be extradited to India very soon. So the principle in extradition is that what's a crime in one country should also be a crime in the other country. Right? Like in old days, if India and UAE had an extradition treaty, you could not ask UAE to extradite Dawood Ibrahim because what was seen as gold smuggling in India was gold trading and legal in UAE. So I'm just giving you a very crude example to make the point that for extradition to work, something that's a chargeable crime in one country should also be a chargeable crime in the other country. The other important thing is principle. Extradite or prosecute. So if it's a chargeable crime also in the country where the person is, then the country can prosecute the person under the same law, right? So either extradite or prosecute. You can't take a cop-out way, right?
And do nothing.
And do nothing. Because if it's chargeable in your country, then you prosecute. The third thing is that extradition applies to cases where a jail sentence is more than 1 year. That's a very key thing. And that's where I am intrigued, although these are very early days and they will be like, we have supplementary charge sheets. They will be superseding indictments also as we go ahead, as we have seen in the case of Vikas Yadav, Nikhil Gupta, etc. So Americans have the same system, superseding indictments. We call them supplementary charge sheets. So more might come up. In this case, however, in none of the two indictments are they seeking a jail sentence.
No.
So their prayer so far in the criminal indictment is all about forfeiture. That's forfeiture of all the resources and all the monies and wealth that you might have collected or money you might have raised, as a suspect, in bonds using these methods. So they will forfeit all of that. And they say that if by way of third party transfers, by way of change of identity, by way of putting one bail or the other, I'm simplifying the language, that money is not available, then they have the right to use they have the right to access other sources and avenues to recover that money.
Right.
The SEC indictment, their prayer seeks forfeiture and penalties as well. But however, for now they list financial penalties. At the same time, if you read these sections of the law, and I've checked with some lawyers, if you if you read these sections of the law, many of these laws involve sizable jail sentences, because in America, jail sentences are very generous. I say it with a sense of irony and sarcasm, because American jail prison system, you know how it works. It works on turnover, right? The longer somebody is kept in the prison, the more the prison company might make. I'm oversimplifying it. So there may be in supplementary charge sheets or supplementary indictments, those things coming up. You can read the entire indictment. We'll share a link with you. You can read that, but I'll give you a summary of the 5 counts on which charges have been now leveled. Number 1, count 1 is conspiracy to violate Foreign Corrupt Practices Act knowingly and willingly. Then it lists out many of these. In fact, so many that it goes from A to P. Yes. So there are 16 points, and many of these points have sub-points also. So A to P is 16. These are the overt acts. So count 1, conspiracy to violate FCPA, and under this, overt acts to do this, that is 16 points. Then count 2. Count 2 is securities fraud conspiracy. It says, read paras 1 to 123, re-alleged, right? So they're repeating their charges, which is the main body of the indictment. Count 3, wire fraud conspiracy, conspiracy to transmit, cause to transmit through signs, signals, pictures, and sounds. That's a very tough American law, right? Powerful people have got into trouble because of that law. Count 4 is securities fraud as pertaining to 114A bond. That's one category of bonds that were raised. And count 5 is conspiracy to obstruct justice. And that's interesting because they say that the accused in this case have knowingly and intentionally conspired to corruptly alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal a record, document, and other object with the intent to impair the object's integrity and availability for use in an official proceeding. That is just a reading of the law, the text of the law, and obstruct, influence, impede official proceedings, to wit, for example, the grand jury inquiry. And that is where for count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they sought a forfeiture, and count 3, again they sought a forfeiture. So that is the summary of this indictment.
And in fact, for the last point, there's something about the obstruction of justice. There's a very interesting little part there where the indictment talks about how several of the people associated with Azure Power, to show that they were complying with the US laws and that they were being very transparent, they initiated an inquiry of their own. And using this inquiry, they seemingly hid a lot of their own involvement while pointing at the Adani Group executives, saying that it was them. So I'll read out.
So it became every man for himself, as they say.
Absolutely. And the word, it's very clear what the indictment says. In addition, Cabanes, Saurav Agarwal, Malhotra, Rupesh Agarwal, and co-conspirator 1 made and agreed to make selective disclosures in connection with the internal investigation and the government investigations, namely revealing the defendants Gautam Adani's, Sagar Adani's, and Vineet Jain's requests for bribe money, but concealing their own participation in the bribery scheme. This strategy was designed to create the appearance that the co-conspirators were reporting misconduct rather than perpetrating misconduct.
So they've been caught at doing this as well.
Yes.
They've been caught. At the same time, it's interesting that the indictment has not charged Azure because they are an American company.
Right.
And if anything, the jurisdiction applies to them more directly.
Absolutely.
I think this story is going to endure because this story will be with us over the next few days. We've seen already the carnage of the markets, particularly with Adani shares, and also some international implications. Kenyans, for example, announced that they were withdrawing from the joint venture with the Adanis. It's a very sizable deal between Adani and Kenya. $700 million includes Nairobi airport expansion and also quite a bit of power generation. Africa, as we know, is sun-rich.
Yes.
How strong do you think will this fallout be?
I think it's already, the ramifications are already mounting. For example, just this morning, Adani Green Energy itself said that it was pulling out, it was not going to issue $600 million worth of dollar-denominated bonds. This is clearly money that it was looking to raise to invest in further business and all of that. So if it's not being able to raise this, that's directly going to impact its businesses. And reputationally, a lot of business deals have to do with reputation, and all internationally, everybody knows if America is upset with you or is saying that you've done something illegal, then most people are likely to be hands off. They're like, we don't want to get involved in this.
So this is a real period of crisis.
I think so.
Because
It's a big
questions
problem.
will also be raised about disclosure. Because this indictment says that while the Adani Group knew that these investigations were going on, FBI had reached out to them,
Right.
SEC had reached out to Azure, and that was Adani's were informed of that. And that's when they ordered these internal inquiries as well. So while they knew all of that, nobody made any disclosure about this either to the Indian regulator
Right.
or in their own annual reports
Or the stock exchanges.
Or during their roadshows to the likely investors in their bonds. So while they were selling their bonds, they were not allegedly making these disclosures. So the questions of transparency and disclosure will also come in, and I think some questions will be raised of Indian regulators as well.
Absolutely.